That capacity for self-consciousness grows within us as we grow up, as we develop. That sense of self-consciousness gets more and more and more solidified, right? And often the more solidified it gets, the less we experience the sort of mysterious wonder of life, you know? And it leaves this sense of it creates this sense of what you might call the presumption of relatedness. This comes along with self-consciousness, which is sort of, it's a presumption that now I, whatever that is, I am now in a relationship with everything else. I'm in relationship with you, I'm in relationship with life, I'm in relationship with the objects that I encounter in life, all of it. And that I am basically fundamentally something different than everything I encounter, right? It's a presumption that this is the case. It seems to be the case. It feels like it's the case. We can perceive life that way, certainly. But it's actually, in the end of the day, it's a presumption. And what comes along with that presumption is a sort of presumption of relatedness, that I am relating to things. And when we relate to things, we have this innate drive to close that gap. It's kind of a weird, paradoxical drive. It's one to close the gap of relatedness. So we have a drive towards intimacy to the point of merging, right? So we can lose ourself, whether it's in something we're doing or seeing or another human being. The desire to sort of merge with, to create such an intimacy of relatedness that the sort of boundaries to a certain extent of oneself and whatever you're relating with or to starts to feel like they kind of dissolve to some extent. So we have an innate drive to that. The drive for intimacy is largely compelled by the drive to close the gap that self-consciousness creates. Right? Simultaneously, there's the equal and opposite instinct that comes with this presumption of relatedness, the ego presuming that it is other and in relationship to everything, which is, it's also simultaneously having to push things away in order to establish itself, right? We know ourselves to great extent by what we're not, right? I am not the world at large. I am me, right? I am not a Republican. I am a Democrat. Or I'm not a Democrat. I'm a Republican. I am not a Christian. I'm a Buddhist. And I can show you the secret handshake that will show that, right? So there's this strange thing that comes with self-consciousness, this innate to self-consciousness. It's not your self-consciousness. It's not unique to you or me or anybody. It's just sort of self-consciousness comes with this sort of push-pull, this kind of relatedness that wants to keep closing the gap. So we feel this intimate connection with people, places, and things, as well as activities, that we have a desire to close the gap, but also a desire to constantly be establishing the boundary, right? So that we know where we are, we know where we stand, and we know that in a kind of distinct opposition to whatever we think is not ourself. So this is a strange place to be, right? And this is what these traditions, by however they depict the reason for this occurring, is, at least in the Western tradition, is experienced as a kind of fall, right? It's a kind of fall from grace. And it's a good way to, a terminology to use if we remember that the terminology really doesn't pertain to some sort of objective, philosophical reality as much as it does to a subjective experience of being. That the subjective experience of being can feel like kind of a fall from grace, right? And so there's the push-pull. We desire to have our boundaries dissolve, and also we're terrified of having our boundaries dissolve.